Oh gosh, sorry.
Can we? Yeah, I'm just saying, can we answer the questions maybe?
Okay, let's get started. Hopefully more people will join. So thank you everyone to coming to the first session of International Society of Biopharmaceutical Statistics webinar series. And this is the first one. We're going to launch a series of webinars that you'll see the topics on the screen. We're aiming to promote statistical innovations and methodologies, as well as practical considerations and challenges in bringing stats innovation into reality. So we're going to separate perhaps two series of topics in the future. One is focused on methodology and statistical innovations. The other one is bring innovations into practice, considering challenges and collaborations, etc. So we might feature those sessions in memory of key contributors to this area in pharmaceutics statistics, and that will be announced in 2025. So details is come, stay tuned. So these series will be monthly held. We'll announce the contents, abstracts, and speakers in LinkedIn and ASA Connect with the registration links. So the first time we had tested, and in the future we might send out Zoom registrations, and those people who opt in the mailing list of ISBS webinar series will send that to your email through the mailing list. And big kudos to our webinar committee. I will introduce them. So if you are part of this call, please wave to the screen so that audience know who you are. So Haitao Pan is from St. Jude's Hospital. He's the lead of the webinar series. And Dong Shi from Gilead. Please wave to the screen. I can't see the screen, so I just assume you're waving now. Han Zhou, not sure if you are able to join the session. If you are, please wave to the screen. And Han Zhou is from Merck. Ray Tao Ling is from MD Anderson. He won't be able to join us today. So they have done tremendous work behind the scene and put together all these topics, and you guys already know that we arranged to January next year. So if you are interested in presenting or interested in participating, feel free to reach out. Stay tuned. Without further ado, let's dive into the topic today. So we have a great panel today to discuss the influencing policies through and statistical innovations through collaborations. It all started with me reading a ASA Biopharm report one day. It is, I remember, a spring session in 2024. And I find this actually two articles very intriguing, talk about how statisticians can influence the regulatory policy and guidances. I find one of them, it is an interview, but it is on the paper, it's not live. And I find many people might be benefit in this topic, and many of the topics are very close and relevant to our day-to-day work as well. So I reach out to Mei Jing, who is the editor of the ASA Biopharm report, and she also elected publication officer at ASA Biopharm session executive committee for term 2025 and 2027. So here we go. This is the session we collaborate ISBS webinar series and ASA Biopharm report. So we're gonna focus on the discussion on the process of developing the guidance and how to communicate and implement and collaborate with to drive the innovations. So disclaimer, as you see from other sessions as well, the opinions will be expressed by individuals and representing their personal opinions, not the position from their respective employers. So the first, when many people see the title of influencing regulatory guidance and policy, they have no idea what it is, but really it is for us to understand from the regulatory side how the process were developed, what are the challenges in implementing it from regulatory perspective and from industry perspective, from academia perspective as well, and how the collaboration between regulatory industry and academia can work together to drive the innovation and influence the policy and make it as a improved and close to reality and close to a better position. So that is what we're gonna talk today. Quick introduction on how the policy was developed and how we're gonna communicate and implement from regulatory perspective and from industry perspective, how the innovation can be driven through the collaborations. Without further ado, I'm gonna introduce the panel. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the note. I don't know why my phone is not cooperating. If you guys can bear with me, I have to stop sharing. I'll quickly stop sharing while I introduce the panel. The good part is I can now see all your beautiful faces. Give me 1 minute while I introduce the panel. So I'll start with Dr. Ivan Cheng. He has more than 25 years of experience in the pharmaceutical company. He's VP and Head of Oncology Biostatistics, Global Biometrics and Data Sciences at BMS, leading the global statistical support on oncology development. He also oversees the statistical methodology and study design, innovation, and optimization team. Prior to joining BMS, Ivan was VP and Head of Statistics Science in AbbVie. Dr. Bill Wong is Executive Director and in the development of biostatistics and research decision science at Merck. In this position, he is responsible for statistical strategy and operation in Asia Pacific and clinical safety statistics. And Greg Levin is Associate Director of Statistical Science and Policy in Office of Biostatistics in the FDA Center of Drug Evaluation and Research. For time's sake, I'll be brief. And Dr. Margaret Gomez is the Vice President and Statistics Head for Inflammation and Immunology and Pfizer Global Product Development. And our moderator, Dr. Weili He, is Distinguished Research Fellow and the Head of Medical Affairs and Health Technology Assessment Statistics at AbbVie. So again, let me share my screen. Without further ado, I will hand the floor to our moderator, Weili He.
Great, thank you very much. Can you put that in the presenter mode, the slides? So thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me as a moderator, and thanks everyone for attending. We're going to have a great panel discussion. So the first question is to Greg. So in the 2024 spring issue of a biopharmaceutical report, you and others from FDA wrote a very interesting and article on how you develop statistical policies and guidances. I think for myself, I have always wondered how the topics came up and how what's the process of development, and then how the interaction with between the regulators and the industry on the feedback, etc. So the question here is, what is the process, if you can describe the process for developing a guidance, and if you can touch on some of the sub-bullet point on how the FDA, ICH identify and select topics, how the guidance policy initiated and drafted, and how the guidance policy is updated, and how to communicate to industry. Greg?
Sure, and thanks for the invitation to participate today and for the question. You know, as you mentioned, the ASA BioPharm Spring Report, we wrote an article that tried to describe this process in a fair amount of detail. So I'd encourage folks who are interested to take a look at that, and I'll only touch on high-level aspects of it today. But just to cover, I guess, you know, the overarching goal first, you know, we're really trying to have a flexible, transparent, effective process for developing statistical policy and guidance, and have put in place some processes, some steps to achieve that. But, you know, I think there's always room for improvement. So participating in sessions like this and hearing feedback from you all and the other panelists is great. And I look forward to hearing feedback and suggestions on how to improve the process. But, you know, diving into the specific questions here, first off, I would say there's a number of factors that impact, you know, how the process works. You know, is the topic like mostly statistical, or is it cross-disciplinary? You know, how urgent is development of statistical policy and guidance? Are we in a pandemic setting where it's, you know, there's an urgent need? So there's a lot of factors that impact it. But that being said, I'll just talk through like some general aspects of the process when we're talking about a statistical policy or guidance topic that is going to be led by my office, the Office of Biostatistics, which is in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. So in terms of how we would identify topics, there's really a diverse set of sources of topics that, you know, we're looking for. These include external feedback, you know, listening sessions, public workshops, statutory commitments and negotiations with pharma, other external sources of information. They also include just our, you know, familiarity with emerging areas in the statistical literature and research findings and, you know, developments in certain areas. And then they also include like internal sources of topics, like, are we seeing issues in our statistical reviews, common issues that are challenging, for which clarity and policy would be helpful to ensure that we're consistent and effective and have quality reviews. So those are just a few of the areas. That's how we identify topics, but then we also need to prioritize them because, you know, we have limited resources in terms of how much time and effort we can put into statistical policy and guidance development. So we really want to prioritize based on public health impact. I mean, I would say that's really where, you know, the number one factor is. But there's other factors involved as well. Like if we have a statutory commitment to publish a guidance in a certain time frame, we're going to do that. In terms of how it's initiated and drafted, you know, we typically will create what we call a working group or a committee, which will have diverse representation across our office. And oftentimes we'll also have representation from other offices or centers within our agency. So we'll often have clinical pharmacology, perhaps representatives from the Center for Biologics or the Center for Devices, depending on the topic and how, you know, widespread the guidance is going to be. And they have, clear deliverables and timelines, and there's a process in place to get feedback along the way. We have clear processes for kind of clearance review and ensuring that there's support and that what goes in there is consistent with other policies that we have. And then the guidance is eventually published typically as a draft, and it is posted on the Federal Register. It's posted on our website and it's released on the Federal Register, and the public typically has 60 days to provide comments on the guidance. And so that's one opportunity for external feedback on our guidance, and we very carefully consider public comments and leverage those when we are revising guidances and creating final drafts of guidances. But we also try to kind of have, there's many other opportunities for, I guess, external feedback, external participation. So, we will typically disseminate our thoughts on the guidances through many different forums. Recent efforts have developed what we call guidance podcasts and guidance snapshots, which are tools to kind of describe the guidances in widely available forums. And we'll usually discuss these at public conferences and other forums and settings like this where we can get feedback. So those are kind of different tools that we'll use for communicating them to industry. And the goal really is to, ensure that there's a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve and what the key principles are, and then to get feedback and to improve it as time goes on. So that's just, touching on some of the high level aspects of the process. And as I said, I think we go into a lot more detail in the spring report and actually talk through one of the recent examples, which was development of draft guidance on master protocols, kind of talk through the different aspects of that process to illustrate how this was done with the master protocols guidance. And, we're just talking through that example, where we are currently at with the master protocols draft guidance is we did receive a number of very helpful public comments. That guidance was originally published as a draft, and we are currently, carefully considering those comments and working to revise the guidance, and have also discussed this and presented on this at several different recent public workshops and gotten feedback through those forums as well. So that's just one example how this all works. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. I think based on the spring report and also what you just mentioned, is really very insightful. At least for myself, I got a much better understanding of these processes. However, definitely we want to also dive into some specifics. So if you go to next slide. So Greg, you talk about the principles that or the Office of Biostatistics try to apply is to a flexible, transparent, and effective process to develop statistical policies and guidances. So how well the guidances are applied during sort of these principles applied during the development and implementation of those guidances?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's, it's also one where I'd love to hear feedback from other panelists on this. I mean, I'll say that one area where I do see, we've put more emphasis recently, and probably there's room for improvement is I guess what you describe as implementation here. So, I think oftentimes in the past, perhaps the guidance would be published and we would just kind of assume that everybody understood it and would follow it, and I think that that's obviously not the case in many situations where there's really an important, it doesn't end with the publication of a draft or a final guidance, right? There should be approaches in place to both internally, educate and provide training and get feedback and identify gaps or barriers or areas for improvements, and also do that externally. I mean, I can cite an example, which I think we've all seen challenges with the implementation of ICH E9R1. It's not so clear cut on how to implement the estimand framework, even if we're, all supportive of the concepts that are embedded in it. And so, yeah, I guess, in terms of how well I do think that we've put in place some really good processes to develop quality guidances. Obviously, there's room for improvement there too, but if I had to highlight one area where I think there could be some, continued work to to improve, it would be in terms of what happens after a guidance or a policy is developed and disseminated in terms of education, training, getting feedback, identifying gaps and barriers, improving over time. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. The example you gave, ICH ENR1, definitely a great example, right? We all read it multiple times, but exactly how to implement it is still some questions of understanding as well. So from industry perspective, what do you think of the current communication implementation aspects? What areas particularly went well and what area could be improved? So Ivan, I will give you a chance to respond to that.
Okay, thank you, Wei. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this webinar. I think I know we did one session at the FDA industry workshop, right? And this one we targeted a broader audience. So thank you for doing that. In terms of this question, I think just want to highlight a couple of things. I think industry really welcome the kind of collaboration, scientific exchange that with the regulatory FDA in this case, but also a PMDA, or if you think about the ICH sort of organization in developing the guidance documentation, right? And I think in terms, and I know this question is more focusing on communication and implementation. The communication definitely, as Greg mentioned, obviously posting those for public for public comment before it's finalized is one great step so for people to be aware of what's coming. And then in terms of communication, there's a lot of good scientific forums like this, the ASA, the DIA sort of forums. Then there's multiple channels that could have participation and have some of those sort of sharing of the examples and guidance. So in general, I think that to me, that's getting much better now compared to say 10 years ago, right? And in terms of the areas that particularly went well, I think I actually like to take this estimate and put it more as a positive. I know it's a pretty difficult concept because it's not just statisticians, you also need to convince clinicians about that. But if we also take it back and see, this is really have a really broad-based global regulatory agencies in every country are trying to adapt this framework, right? So a lot of times the policy may be adapted in certain countries, but not the other countries. But in terms of E9, I see a very positive. So everybody trying to understand exactly what it is, and then we will try to implement that across the board. And so when we write protocols to multi-regional, we don't see that much of a difference in terms of requirement. For example, I know there's still some differences, but in general, people say, hey, are you adhering to the ICH E9 guidance, right? So that is really great. Some of the areas I think can be improved. Maybe in the guidance, I know in general to stay pretty high level, but if we could try to get some of the examples to illustrate some of those more complex concepts would be really helpful. And one thing I really like, for example, the adaptive design guidance, right? To list out a few of the examples of how that has been done in the past and comment on how that sort of some of those principles was being sort of implemented in those. And that, to me, it just helped sort of the community to understand a bit more how specifically that kind of guidance would be translated into.
Great, thank you, Ivan. Any other comments from other panel members? If you have anything additional to add?
Can I add something?
Sure.
Yeah, so I like what Ivan said about examples. I think that really is crucial, right? So for example, if you compare the guidance from the FDA as well as the ICH actually provided a list of examples, for example, for estimates. There are even case studies in there. I think that is good. But I also think that in terms of implementation, it really depends on how specific the guidance is. So for example, for adaptive design, for example, for multiple comparisons, let's say other things that are, uniquely designed and statistical, that seems to be fairly easy to implement. But estimates is not necessarily just a statistical question. It's a question that is requires a lot more consideration from clinical, from medical, and so on. And so it's not as easy anymore because there are a lot more stakeholders that we need to practically involve, and therefore in terms of implementation and in terms of training, it's much more complex. So I think it really depends as well in terms of guidance. There are some that I feel like it's easier to implement, particularly it's specifically statistical, because we know from statistics, there are some principles that are just purely, this is correct, this is not correct. But the gray zone is when it becomes more cross-functional.
Well said. Thank you.
Ju-
Any other comments?
Yeah, Willie, just to add a little bit more, I think, Greg's mentioned about that 3 key feature of guidance, where it's fair, it's transparent, it's flexible. I think they really set a great example, and ICH in a way learn a lot from that and further expand that in terms of make sure all the region get incorporated, all the stakeholder get incorporated, not only in the initial development, but also in the implementation stage, where ICH do usually have an implementation working group. After the design working group, they have an implementation working group, which I think that's something probably worthwhile to further follow across the region, to think how would you, there's a guidance, how would you even think about landing it on the ground? What are the practical considerations in the implementations? For that, if we back to the E9R1 examples, where I feel, for example, the principal stratum is a very useful concept, but how would you implement that? Not only to the statistical community, but with all the larger medical community. That does require us to put our head together in terms of how to explain that, how to put up something not so rigid, but also something useful to actually guide the implementation of that so-called concept. I think that's the area we can put our head together to think more how we can improve.
Yeah, I feel, Bill, that's an excellent thought. If I get you correctly, you mean ICH has an implementation working group or whatever, but I'm not sure of FDA if there is such a sort of a follow-up to implementation. That's probably a great area that we could focus on.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so any other comments from other panel members? If not, we can move on to the next set of questions. Great. So let's touch on the innovation. That's definitely a big piece of this guidance is communication, implementation. So the implementation, some say that regulatory guidance may constrain the innovation, but some actually feel that the guidance actually enhance, improve, or promote the innovation and the implementation of such innovations. So both might be correct in certain situations. So what we want to hear is how do we drive and implement innovation through influencing regulatory policies and guidances? Maybe first I will go to Ivan and then Bill.
Thank you, Weili, for this is a question different depending on the different perspective we look at it, right? I'm in the camp that having a guidance document to frame the boundaries of how we could operate actually could really encourage a lot of innovation. And the way that I think sort of how a very successful sort of a collaboration between industry, academia, and regulatory agencies in sort of developing the guidance is really critical. Like, for example, in the industry, we have lots of real world examples, and we know the challenges, right? they're facing us in terms of different, whether it's a patient population or a study designs. So through the collaboration like the scientific forum or the industry working groups, we would be able to sort of synthesize some of those industry experience and recommendation and work with our regulatory colleagues, right? And so that the way and how that really good, some of these really great examples we talked about, the E9 guidance, right? But also the adaptive design guidance, right? There's a pharma working group that start out with working on that, and then eventually really get involved in some of these scientific forums with the regulatory colleagues interaction and academic from a methodology perspective. So in the end, it really come to a really good guidance document. The CID is another way they, when Lisa Vance was the director, she would invite the industry participants to come to the FDA to present some of the examples of challenges in facing those kind of complex innovative trial design. So that kind of conversation really, to me, is a really great way of sort of ensuring that we could set an expectation of how we can do the statistical innovations.
Great, thank you, Ivan. It's very insightful. Bill, anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ivan regarding thinking about innovation. I would add another angle regarding innovation, where I think there's a sense of innovation in the larger sense, where how we can develop guidance to really help drive the innovation of medical product so that it can be get to the patient early, sooner, broader. So from that point of view, the guidance itself do need to really consider a balance between the so-called new method, but also the practical nature of that guidance. Because you don't want, even though it's pretty new from a statistical point of view, but it's actually harder to land on the ground to be implemented. So it does need to strike that balance where when we think about innovation, we don't only think about innovation, particularly for the statistical related guidance from a stat perspective. We need to think about the innovation in the larger sense. Not only it's something useful, efficient from a sample size part, but it's actually practical to be implemented across the globe so the drug can be developed very effectively, get to patient early. So I think that's why I like the flexibility in the FDA's principle in developing the guidance. That flexibility need to think about the right level, to what degree we want to build in the newness of the statistical concept, but still very practical.
So Bill, it sounds like you are following the same theme of not only developing the guidance and principles, but how we actually be practically implementing those as well. That are equally important.
We have to think about that.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, excellent comments. Anybody else has a comment on this question before we move to the next one?
Yeah, I have two. One is the beauty of guidance, whether it is with FDA or ICH or EMA, is that it provides focus on where to innovate. It's like okay, this is where you want it to go, and this provides some parameters for innovation, and therefore what happens is that we focus our attention on what truly matters. But I also wanted to push the envelope a little bit. A guidance is only a guidance. It's not necessarily binding. And therefore, there are always avenues. One, to take a look at what are some of the ambiguities for which we can make some clarity. And two, again, science advances over time. It doesn't mean that the guidance right now this is already fixed forever. It can be reviewed every 5 years. and so on. So again, I do not see it as a barrier. I think it provides some clarity at some point, but then I think we still need to keep on evaluating it for the future.
It's a great point. Yeah, thank you. Great. Yeah, so let's move on to the next question. So both Julia and Meg, you have been in both in the regulator aspects, but also in the industry aspects. So first, I will go to Julia. What do you think the obstacles or challenges do you foresee in integrating statistical innovation into regulatory guidance?
Okay, thank you for the great question, and also thank you, Willie, for moderating this great session, and Cindy for the invitation. Integrating statistical innovation into regulatory guidance may face several challenges. And here I would like to highlight 3 key challenges in my opinion. First and foremost, I would say regulatory acceptance. I think the biggest challenge is obtaining acceptance for new statistical methodology and innovative approaches within the regulatory framework. And generally speaking, regulatory agencies such as FDA, EMA, PMDA, and CDE may be very cautious about adopting new statistical techniques without substantial evidence of their reliability and validity. And then this leads to the next challenge, which is the resource constraints. Integrating statistical innovation may require additional resources in terms of technology expertise and time. And both regulatory agencies and industry stakeholders may face challenges in allocating those resources very effectively, especially for the regulatory agencies. I worked in the office while studying the FDA CDER for 13 years. So I know firsthand that the regulatory reviewers are extremely busy with their routine review work. And this means that they have very limited time and energy to devote to the innovative methodology. And then I would say this links to the next challenge, which is education and training. So when the industry plans to propose an innovative methodology to the agency, it will be very critical that the industry does their homework in a very sufficient way and provide thorough and comprehensive information to the agency for regulatory decision-making, informative regulatory decision-making. And the agency and the industry could jointly organize think tank meetings and workshops to ensure a common understanding of these innovative methods. So in order to conquer the challenges I mentioned very efficiently, I think we need effective communication and collaboration, which is also, I think, in later part of this discussion among all the regulatory agencies, industries, and also the statistical expertise. For example, we need more events like the one we have today to bring together, the agency and the industry experts to have a very transparent and interactive discussion. So I will stop here, and I think Meg and others may have something else to add.
Yeah, excellent points. Meg, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I like everything that Julie has said. Of course, we have seen this happening, right before our eyes in both sides when we were at the agency and when we are now working in pharma. Maybe just 2 things that I wanted to add. Historical precedents can actually be a barrier as well. Just imagine there are certain decisions that were created before. It might create uncertain, or unfair competition as well. So sometimes it's not very easy. We always have, if I remember before, we always have to look at what is the regulatory jurisprudence, what we have decided previously. And then all of a sudden, for example, one thing that we did previously was we wanted to change the endpoint. With the publication of a new guidance. just imagine how would that actually imply to other companies that have drugs in development. As we know, drug development is a long cycle. It doesn't happen very quickly, and so the implications of a new guidance could go very far, for all the compounds that have been in development far along in their development. So that is one. Other things could be, let's say, labeling as well. So we have done Bayesian methodology since probably in the 90s. And why is it that it's been extremely difficult still how to do labeling? Until now, I haven't even seen anything for which Bayesian methodology has really impacted labeling of products. So, there are some practical, as Julia has already said previously, there are some practical implications, and I don't want to be, I don't want to, and I think she has said everything. I just wanted to make sure that, those are other things that are in consideration. Why there are certain statistical innovations that are just quite a little difficult to implement.
Yeah, Julia, you have some additional?
Add something. Actually, I learned this just yesterday. So yesterday I had a phone call with the head of FDA C3TI. That's because at the end of this month I'm going to the FDA to give a case to give a presentation about a case study on RWE. And then she mentioned something which is really new to me. And then glad you are here. You can, you're welcome to share your opinion. And then what she said is that the FDA, many reviewers in the FDA side, they feel the industry is not innovative enough, it's not aggressive enough, because we always feel the other way. Okay, we try to be aggressive, and then we feel the agency might be conservative. That is why we hold back. We don't want to bring the new design, the new methodology to the agency. But sounds like there may be a change of heart, or maybe there's some, some other changes in the agency. But this is something I just knew yesterday. I want to share with this small group.
That's certainly news to me as well. Greg, you have some comments?
Yeah, I was going to make a comment, and I can cycle back to what Julia just said, which I think kind of fits into what I was going to say. So I guess first off, I just want to emphasize, I think we want value added in innovation. I don't think we want innovation just for the sake of innovation. I think we want innovation that improves how we can provide timely and reliable evaluation of drug safety and effectiveness. So, from an FDA perspective, we are going to be considering the value that's added by innovation relative to additional risks in terms of making incorrect regulatory decisions. In terms of like obstacles or challenges, oftentimes we might be a bit hesitant to provide guidance recommending a new innovative approach if we have lots of uncertainty about, what risks it might add and/or uncertainties about how much benefits it provides in terms of reliably or, efficiently evaluating drugs. So something, and this fits into what Julia was just saying, something that might lead to us having more uncertainty is when we don't have experience, right? We don't have review experience of trial designs or analysis approaches that utilize those innovative approaches. And so it's kind of this cycle that's hard to get out of. We're hesitant to provide guidance and recommendations on it because we don't have experience. And then sponsors are hesitant to propose using it in their trials because there's no guidance or they're concerned that there might not be accepted. In some cases, that might be real concerns. So how do you break out of that cycle? One is to more definitively show the benefits of the innovative tools and explore the risks. Another is to build that experience. And I think some of these programs like the CID program and C3TI, that's exactly what they're intended to do, is to provide a safe space where we can learn, collaborative learning on whether it actually is value-added innovation and what the risks and what the benefits are. So, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I do think that sometimes we often don't get proposals from sponsors, but very understandably so. And so hopefully some of these programs can help that a little bit. And just to be honest, like we haven't actually gotten a lot of submissions to the CID program in the last few years. So it's, even though that program is there, we're not necessarily seeing its it being used, you know, quite as much as we might want to actually develop learnings on some of the values of some of these approaches.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Mac?
Yeah, and I think it's my comment is going to be very timely as to what Greg has said. And two things. One is, I think he has already alluded to this one as well. Even in the industry, we wanted some certainty. Given that drug development is a very long process, just imagine if you know, we don't have any agreement for a particular methodology now, and then once we start submitting, all of a sudden is that, you know, this is unacceptable and it would be a refuse to file. That would be a huge blow. Two is, well, we abide by timelines because drug development doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have competitors, we have patients that need our drugs, you know, expediently. And so this is the reason why having a process that's quite long could be a deterrent as well to having pilots like these. Once you start putting in interactions with FDA, you can just imagine how long the preparation that could mean. And Julia knows this very well. You know, it takes us a very long time, and the FDA as well. It takes a very long time to complete the reviews, and so, you know, having these kinds of things could actually be, you know, you have to decide very carefully whether it is going to be helpful for you from a company perspective as well.
Great. Yeah, thank you. All those very wonderful points. I think it's a good segue to move to the next set of questions because, you know, the draft guidance and we need intensive, you know, in-depth discussions, feedback loops. So we want to really understand, you know, generally how the collaboration is going among health authority, industry, academia as well. So the next set of questions touch on the collaboration. What's your overall impression on the collaboration among, you know, all three sort of across organizations? So again, Meg and Julia, you have been in both sides of sort of fence in the as regulators and as right now the industry as well. So maybe Meg first, what's your thoughts on question 6? On your overall impression of a collaboration?
I think this has been going very well. I do not think that there is some deficiency on this. I know that right before we create guidance, there's usually a lot of discussion on that, probably also related to changes in laws or PDUFA negotiations and so on. And academia is always at the forefront of innovation. So I think there's no deficiency on collaboration. For me, it's usually on the implementation side. That's where things becomes a little bit murky. But the collaboration between the three, I think it's working excellent as it should be.
Great. Yeah, agree with you. Julia, any thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I fully agree with you know, everything Mac just said. Based on my experience, I also think the collaboration has been very effective. I think this is because we share the common commitment of protecting and improving public health. No matter you are from industry, academia, or you're from the agency, I think we all share the same goal. But however, I still think there are still some opportunities to enhance the communication. So one area for improvement, and here, you know, Greg, you are here, it's a suggestion, not a complaint. So one area for improvement I like to see is that the agency has a more timely response to industry needs. For example, the qualification process for biomarkers or novel endpoints often takes several years. And in today's world, science technology developed in probably an exponential speed. And by the time a particular biomarker endpoint is qualified, newer or maybe more advanced alternatives may already have emerged. So it's kind of out of date already. So therefore, you know, if the agency can adopt a more agile or responsive approach, it can greatly enhance the collaboration among the health authorities, industry, and academia, and we can collectively respond better to the ever evolving the landscape of healthcare and innovation. And so we can, benefit public health and fulfill the unmet medical needs altogether. So that's my suggestion, but I fully understand that there's lots of resource constraints from the agency side. And I know the new PDUFA is under discussion. So hopefully there are some areas can be addressed. Thank you.
Very well said. Ivan, you have a comment?
Yes, I totally agree with Julie and Matt. What they said, sort of overall impression has been really good in terms of developing the guidance. I just want to also add one comment is sometimes in terms of implementation of the guidance, right? At a different, there's a different interpretation of the guidance, whether it's at a company level or whether it's within the regulatory agencies, right? When you go to different divisions, for example, you might have a slightly different interpretation, whether it's statistician or sometimes the clinicians. And so there's something I know it probably more goes around the training and education within the regulatory agency and also within the companies, how to interpret those guidance documents so it would be more consistently implemented, right? When it comes to one division or when it goes to the different agencies, everybody would have the same expectation or same interpretation of those guidance would be a pretty important for sponsors, right, working in this disease area.
Thank you, Ivan. So with the interest of time, maybe I will move on to the last question and then come back to see if there are any additional comments from the panels. So, Bill, you really have been involved in several ICH guidance sort of working group, and also you have experience in working in China and with other sort of cross-region activities. So in your view, what is the biggest opportunities and challenges of enhancing global collaboration?
Well, there are many of those, but if I have to pick one, I think there's one area really I feel we need to work together on. That is what I call synthesize the non-randomized information across the globe. I think we have done a great job, particularly in the STAT community for the randomized information. The guidance really cover a lot on that, but particularly the real-world information, the non-randomized information, how do you synthesize them into a more valid decision-enabling evidence? That's the area require a lot of more statistical thinking on that. And I feel we need to work with other disciplines like epidemiology, other different areas across region, across function. So I actually coined that term called MRWE, it's a multi-regional real-world evidence. I feel we need to work on that.
That's music to my ears in my work in the post-market space, a lot of real-world studies, etc. For sure, I completely agree with you. Yeah, so let's see, we have maybe a couple more minutes. Any additional comments from any panel members for the two questions?
Can I add something as the challenge I see? So I think one of the challenge I see is the harmonization of regulatory standards and processes across different regions, and different regulatory requirements, different approval timeline and compliance standards actually pose significant challenges for the industry to operate in multiple markets. And sometimes I think, I'm in regulatory now. I was a statistician. I think sometimes we have to do region-specific protocol amendment just to fulfill their specific, requirement. So sometimes I think this is I would say it's kind of a big barrier for this. So that's the one thing I want to share.
Yeah, Greg, you have a comment?
Yeah, not a direct follow-up to that, but just another comment on question 6, if there's, should I go into that?
Cindy, do you think we still have time? We only have 3 minutes left.
Yes, please.
Okay,
We have time.
please, Greg.
Sure, it can be 30 seconds or less. I mean, just, I guess, being a bit provocative, I guess, on question 6, there's probably room for improvement on collaboration with academia. I think sometimes regulatory policy and guidance development is focused on pharmaceutical and regulatory statisticians working together. I mean, as an example, there's no academic colleagues on this panel today, and being a bit provocative here, and I also heard, feedback after the development of ICH E9R1 that there weren't, academic experts on the working group that created the E9R1 guidance. So I don't exactly know how to encourage that. Of course, like the academic research is really like oftentimes like the foundation of these developments, but I think it's probably an area where there could be improvement.
Yeah, great, yeah. So I think with the rest of time, I will get back to Cindy to close.
Thank you so much. This is an excellent panel session. I really learned a lot. Thank you so much for this interesting discussion. So just to close, many of the panelists mentioned that the ASA Biopharm report has mentioned a lot of details. So I encourage people to check out the 2024 spring session, as well as a very interesting 2024 summer session that has more interesting topics. Please check it out. If you work in the industry, have never heard of ASA Biopharm report, please have some Google search and you will find a lot of interesting issues there. And I would also like to promote the ASA ISBS webinar series. As you've seen at the beginning, we have a series of presentations already lined up. The next one is about digital endpoints in clinical trials. The next one is another interesting panel discussion about the FDA guidance Greg just mentioned about master protocol. We invited people from different regions and from academia, industry, and regulatory to talk about the draft guidance, the question around master protocol. And also very interesting one to 2024 January, efficient dose optimization through backfill. So please pay attention to our ISBS and LinkedIn account and also ASA Connect announcements. With that, I would like to close the session. Thank you so much for joining and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.